The girl who bullied me used insects to scare me. She didn't know they were watching her for me. My name is Julia, and for most of my life, I thought I was the one being hunted. My grandparents raised me. Small house, big garden. Not much money, but a lot of love, which I think is the better deal. Grandpa saved for years to send me to university. He told every neighbor, every cousin, every person who would listen, his granddaughter was going to university. His granddaughter was going to be something. Grandma just cried and pretended she hadn't. I studied hard, top scores, scholarship. I showed up on the first day in a second-hand coat that was slightly too big, with nervous eyes and a careful smile, and I thought, this is it. This is the beginning of everything. It was, just not the way I meant. Jessica found me within the first week. She had that particular kind of confidence that comes not from being good at anything, but from never having been told no. She was loud and golden and cruel in the casual, thoughtless way of someone who has never once considered that other people feel things just as deeply as she does. She decided I was funny, that I was a joke she could return to whenever she needed a laugh. It started with comments, then exclusion, then public scenes. The worst one was in the library. She walked up to my table, smiled at her friends behind her like she was setting up a punchline, and dropped a dead cockroach directly onto page 47 of my textbook. I screamed loud. The entire library turned around. Jessica laughed so hard she grabbed the shelf for support. Her friends filmed it. The video went online. People I'd never met watched me scream and called it hilarious. I want to be transparent. I can solve differential equations. I have memorized the periodic table. But a cockroach, one single cockroach, can reduce me to a shrieking mess in under half a second. This is simply true about me. I grabbed my bag and ran outside. Sat on the steps, heart pounding, embarrassed deeply. It felt physical, like something bruised inside. That's when I noticed the ant. Small, brown, sitting on the toe of my shoe, not moving, just there, angled slightly upward, looking at me. I thought nothing of it. That was my first mistake. After the library, Jessica started calling me a roach girl. Very creative. Moving on. But something else was happening, something with no explanation and no precedent in anything I'd ever studied. The insects started following me. I'd sit in the university garden to eat lunch alone, and within minutes a ring of beetles would form around my bench. Not randomly. A ring, equidistant, all facing inward, all facing me. Then they started reacting to my emotions. One afternoon, Jessica made a comment as she passed, something small and sharp the way she liked them. I felt a flash of anger. Just a flash. I swallowed it fast. But the moment it hit me, every beetle in that ring snapped upright, alert, tense, like soldiers who'd heard a command. Jessica didn't see it, she kept walking, but I watched 8 beetles track her movement across the garden until she disappeared through the doors. They were watching her, for me, even then. A moth followed me home one evening. Every turn I made, it made. When I reached my building, I looked at it and said out loud, "I know you're there." It flew inside before I could close the door. And that is how I ended up locked in the bathroom for 20 minutes while a moth sat on my desk lamp. Very dignified. Then one night, 2 a.m., deep in my textbooks, the moth on the lamp went completely still, and something dropped into my brain like a stone into water. Not a sound, not a voice, a feeling that arrived fully formed, the way you sometimes just know something without knowing how. It said, "You are safe." I pushed my chair back so hard it hit the wall. I pointed at the moth and said, out loud to my empty room, "Did you just talk to me?" The feeling came back. Patient. Certain. Yes. My first thought, I need more sleep. My second thought, a moth is speaking to me and I am apparently responding. I went to bed. I regret nothing. The communication sharpened over the next few days. Not voices, impressions. The way you absorb meaning from a face before you consciously read its expression. They started sharing things. A spider near campus gave me the clear sense that the dean's assistant was stealing money. Small amounts, carefully timed. An ant trail in the cafeteria. The girl behind you is not who she says she is. I want to be very honest. I did not care about any of this. I am a person who wants to graduate, make my grandparents proud, drink tea in peace, and not have insects whisper secrets to me at midnight. In that order. I told them, or told whatever part of myself was receiving them, that I didn't need secrets. I just needed quiet. They got quieter, but they didn't leave. And underneath the quiet, one thing kept returning. Not a secret, more like a warning that hadn't finished forming yet. Something about Jessica. Not what she was doing, what was coming for her. I didn't understand it. I pushed it aside. I shouldn't have. Day 13. Light rain. Gray sky. I was under a tree in the campus garden with a half-eaten apple and an open book. The praying mantis dropped from the branch above me and landed on the page I was reading. Large. Larger than any mantis I'd seen outside a photograph. It had a stillness that felt ancient, not the absence of movement, but the mastery of it. It looked at me with those flat, triangular eyes, and the communication arrived like a door slamming open. Not gentle this time, not warm, cold, final. In 30 days, the world will change. I chewed my apple. I said, change how? Everything hidden will surface. Every balance will break. I said, that sounds like every news cycle. Can you be more specific? The mantis reached out with one serrated foreleg and touched my hand, just the tip of it, precise, deliberate. And it sent me an image, brief and total and wrong the way nightmares are wrong, not in logic, but in atmosphere. A red sky pressing down, streets moving with something that wasn't water, sound that had no origin, people frozen mid-step like photographs of themselves. 3 seconds, then gone. I put down my apple. I said, quietly, are you telling me people get hurt? The mantis was still. Then, it is already here. It will just become visible. It spread its wings and left, the way things leave when they've said everything they need to say. I sat under that tree for a long time. I told myself I didn't believe it. My hands were shaking for the rest of the day. My hands knew better. Day 18 of the 30. Jessica found a photo. First week, the second-hand coat, hair messily pulled back, that expression I didn't know I made, nervous and hopeful and completely unguarded. The face of someone who has arrived somewhere new and is still deciding if they belong. She posted it. Scholarship girl trying to fit in, LOL. It spread in hours, hundreds of comments. Someone wrote, she looks like she still smells like her village. I read that 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on my desk. I thought about Grandpa, about the years he saved, about the look on his face, that huge, overwhelmed, bursting look when he dropped me off that first day. I thought about Grandma pretending not to cry. I thought about the girl in that photo in the coat. She wasn't embarrassing. She was brave. She showed up with no idea what was waiting, and she came anyway. Jessica had turned her into a punchline. The next day, 30 people looked at me differently. I held my books tight and I walked, and I did not stop, and I did not cry.
Hey, you're still here.
If this story is resonating with you and you haven't subscribed yet, taking a second to do so really helps me keep creating stories like this. All right, let's get back to it. But as I passed Jessica's group in the hallway, the air near the baseboard shifted. Ants surfaced first, then beetles, then something with too many legs and a dull black shell I didn't want to look at directly. A wall of them, moving toward her shoes, waiting. I felt the pull, the wanting to let it happen. I breathed in, I breathed out, and without speaking, without knowing exactly how, I told them, "Not yet." They pulled back, slow, reluctant, like they disagreed. That evening, alone in my room, an ant walked across my open palm and stopped in the center. The feeling that came was wordless and completely human. It felt like, "We see you." I don't know why that made me cry, but it did. For a long time. The ant stayed the whole while. When I was done, I wiped my face and said, "Okay, I'm okay." I was not entirely okay, but I would be. 12 days left. Day 30, Tuesday, I woke up and the sky was the wrong color. Not storm wrong, not clouds wrong, red wrong. Deep arterial red at every horizon, bleeding into bruised orange overhead. No clouds anywhere, just that color, vast and still, like it had always been there and we were only now able to see it. I dressed fast, grabbed my bag, phone, water, Grandma's photo from my desk. I don't know why the photo, I just knew. I was still tying my shoes when the sound started. Low, below hearing first, you felt it in the bones of your feet, in your back teeth, in the base of your skull. Then it rose, a tone with no instrument and no origin, something older than music. It lasted 20 seconds, then stopped. The silence after it was the worst part, that specific silence that means something is about to happen. Then the insects came. Not in waves, in one simultaneous eruption, like the earth exhaling everything it had ever held. Up through cracks in pavement, through drains, between roots, from walls, from every gap under every door. The air turned dark with wings before anyone below had time to look up. A man stopped walking and looked up. 2 seconds, then the first cloud hit him. He dropped everything, turned to run, got 3 steps. They were in his mouth, his ears, under his collar, moving with direction, with intention, like each of them knew exactly where it was going. A woman near the fountain clawed at her hair. They were inside it, dozens of them moving in formation, and the sound she made was something I will never fully describe. Not a scream, something underneath screams. A man tried to fight with his jacket, wide arcs, desperate. The swarm split around each swing and reformed instantly, like water, perfectly fluid, perfectly indifferent. Nothing worked, nothing even slowed it. Later, I would learn it wasn't just our city. Reports came in from everywhere at once. The same red sky, the same sound, the same swarms, from every continent simultaneously. Millions of people, all at the same moment, running from the same thing. The world didn't have a word for what happened that day. It still doesn't. I looked at my phone. 17 missed calls, all from Grandma. My chest dropped. I called back. It rang 4 times, 5, 6. She picked up. She said, breathless, "Julia, are you safe? The insects." I said, "I'm safe, I promise. Lock the windows, stay inside. I'll explain everything, I promise." She said, "Are you eating?" Even then, even in the middle of it all, I said yes. I hung up. Not a single insect had come near my building. The cloud moved around it, around me, like a river splitting around a rock. A clean, deliberate arc. I stepped outside. Total chaos everywhere, but within 2 meters of me, a perfect circle of still, clear air.
always that same circle, like something held its shape by will or by order. I held out my hand. A beetle landed on my palm. A moth circled my head once gently, the way it always had, and something clicked into place that I should have understood much sooner.
I was never their victim. Standing in the street with the world screaming around me and not a single insect willing to come within 2 meters of my body, I finally understood that. All those years of running from cockroaches, screaming at moths, sleeping with the light on, because once in primary school, a beetle had landed on my arm and something about its weight had broken a piece of me that never fully healed. And the whole time, they were guarding me. Not guarding me from danger, guarding the world from what happened if something hurt me. That's different. That's very different. The moth had said, to watch, to wait, to protect. I'd assumed I was the one being protected. I hadn't understood that I was the thing that needed containing. I walked through the street. The swarms parted. A woman crouched against a wall, arms over her head. As I passed close, the insects near her thinned. She looked up and found me and stared with the wide, fractured look of someone whose entire model of the world had just broken. I didn't stop. I knew where I was going. I'd known since the hallway, since I said, "Not yet," and they listened, since I understood that they were waiting for me to decide, because they had always been waiting for me to decide. I walked toward the university, toward Jessica. The campus was pandemonium, students barricaded inside, some fleeing into streets, which I could have told them would not help. The sky was still red. The sound came again, a second pulse, deep and bone-wide, and this time I felt it differently, not as a threat, as a signal addressed to me. I found Jessica near the main steps. She hadn't made it inside. She was pressed against a pillar, knees pulled up, both hands shaking in front of her face. Her hair was wild, her clothes were torn at the shoulder. She was crying, not beautifully, not the way people cry in photographs. Really crying. Ugly and raw and completely alone. Around her, the swarm pressed and held, not attacking, not quite, surrounding, waiting. Like it had held her here on purpose, like it had held her for me. I walked toward her. The insects parted. A corridor of calm through the storm, clean as a hallway. Jessica heard footsteps, looked up. She saw me, walking through the worst insect event in human history, with a moth on my shoulder, beetles on my hands, and an expression of total calm on my face. Her face moved through recognition, confusion, disbelief, all of it in 2 seconds. Then she said, barely a whisper, "Julia." I stopped a few feet from her. The swarm hummed around us both. She looked at the insects, at me, at the space around me that nothing would enter, at her own hands, still trembling, still surrounded. And I watched her understand, not slowly, all at once, the full collapse of her version of reality, the one where she was the powerful one, where I was the joke, and everything made the kind of sense that put her at the center. Her voice broke. "Why you? Why does everything choose you?" So small, so genuinely lost. All the cruelty had been stripped out of her by the last few hours. What was left was something almost sad. A person who had defined herself by being chosen, realizing she had been pointing at the wrong person her entire life. I crouched down to her level, looked her directly. I said, "I don't know," because I didn't. I hadn't asked for any of this. Then I said, "Stand up, Jessica." She stared. "Stand up." She stood. I took her arm and walked her through the swarm. The insects moved. They always moved for me. A narrow path, enough for 2 if they walked close. Jessica held my arm the entire way, tight, both hands, eyes forward, not a word.
Not a single laugh.
The event lasted 3 days. Red sky, swarms, the sound, 3 pulses total. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, silence. The sky cleared. The swarms disappeared back into the earth, the walls, the wood, the dark places they'd always lived. And the world stood in the aftermath, trying to find language for what had happened. It couldn't. The language didn't exist yet. It still doesn't. I spent those 3 days moving through the city. The bubble of calm moved with me, always that 2-meter circle of still air. People started following me. Strangers, first a few, then dozens, walking behind me in silence the way people move toward light in the dark. I didn't lead them anywhere particular. I just walked, and they followed, and nothing touched us. My grandparents came the following week. Grandpa cried before he was through the door. Grandma made me eat 2 bowls of soup and said nothing at all about the moth sitting perfectly still on my windowsill the entire visit. That was her way of saying, I see it. I don't understand it. You're still mine. I sat between them on the small sofa, and the ground felt solid for the first time in a long time. I saw Jessica a week after that. She found me on the campus steps. She looked different in a way that went beyond tired. Her hair had gone gray at both temples, fully gray, like something had burned the color out overnight. She sat with her hands pressed flat on her knees, very deliberately, the way people do when they're trying to stop them from shaking. She was only partially successful. She said, after a long silence, I'm sorry. For everything. Not beautifully, plainly, like someone reading from a script they'd written 100 times and only now finally meant. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't entirely okay. You don't say 2 words and erase all of it. But I said, I know. And that was enough. For now. I went back to studying, passed organic chemistry. Grandpa cried again. Some things stay constant. The insects are quieter now, present the way the air is present, constant and unremarked. They're still watching, still waiting, just not urgently. Like whatever they were building toward has entered a new phase, and the phase doesn't require noise. I still can't stand cockroaches. That part never changed. I think you can be afraid of something and still be chosen by it. I think those 2 things can live in the same body at the same time. I know because I live in that body, whatever it is. The mantis came back last night. Same branch, same ancient stillness. I looked at it for a long time before I asked, is it over? It sent me a number, 90. Then it sent me an image, not of the future this time, of me, from outside, the way they see me when they look. What I looked like in their image was not quite human, and underneath the image, a feeling, not a warning, not a threat, something quieter and more permanent than either, something like a correction, like it was clarifying something I'd gotten wrong from the start. They weren't protecting me from the world. They were protecting the world from me. I sat with that for a long time. I'm still sitting with it. Outside my window, the moth is on the glass. It hasn't moved in 3 hours. It's facing outward, not watching me, watching the street below, watching for something I can't see yet. 90 days. I used to be afraid of insects. Now, the world is afraid of them, and they listen to me. But I'm starting to understand what that actually means, and it has nothing to do with being a queen. Queens are chosen. What I am is something older than that, something that was here before the word for it existed. And in 90 days, the world is going to find out what that looks like when it stops being patient. The moth on the glass still hasn't moved. I've stopped expecting it to. I went home that night thinking the worst thing that happened to me was a dead cockroach on page 47. I had no idea that something ancient had just opened its eyes. And it was wearing my face. If you enjoyed this story, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves dark fantasy, and subscribe for more zombie, horror, and revenge stories. I'll see you in the next nightmare.